I grew up believing that Anzac Day would perhaps just fade away as soldiers died. And yet, research has shown us it's Australia's most significant day. So why is that the case? Perhaps it's because we're celebrating not just one battle in World War I, we're celebrating every Australian who's given their life for freedom for people around the globe. Giving your life for others never goes out of fashion. We have two great days that we celebrate across the year. One is Anzac Day and the other is Easter. Both of them celebrate the giving of people's lives freely for the good of other people. In the First World War, Gerald Tucker was a padre with soldiers on the Western Front. And Michael Gladwin tells us of what he said to a soldier one night as he was dying. He knew the soldier wouldn't make it to the next morning. So what do you say to someone, a young man who's dying? Well, this is what he said. I reminded him that his suffering, he was doing what his master had done before him. He's actually referring there to Jesus. And then he went on to say this. He was bearing pain for others, for his dear ones at home, for Australia, for the Empire, for the world. Sacrifice never goes out of fashion. We honour and we celebrate sacrifice in the person of Jesus and in our military. That's another reason that faith runs deep in our nation.
A life that glorifies God is not difficult or complicated, but it just takes little intentional steps to spend time with God, to get up a bit earlier, to pray, to talk about God with whomever was open.
Dave, when you were 17, you had a conversation with your father who had just become the Archbishop of the Sydney Diocese. What did you tell him?
I had the opportunity to sit down with Dad after dinner and summed up all my courage and said, Dad, I've got some news. My girlfriend is pregnant. My mum put her head in her hands like this. My dad kind of looked wistfully out the window. And my mum stood up and walked back to the pantry and sort of went, oh. And then they both sat down and they looked at each other and they said, are you okay? Is she okay? What can we do? How can we help? What can we pray for? What does she need? And I remember that like it was yesterday, this incredibly powerful reaction. Yeah. An immediate feeling, but then choosing to respond in a different way, which has stayed with me for a long time.
In all this time, you got to know Dave Jensen. When you first met Dave Jensen, what was he like?
Well, actually, when I first met Dave, he was in Year 11 at school, and I was at Moore College, and we did some training. We were out I was going for a run one night, and he was, and we just started training together from there. So we stayed in touch as I left Moore College, he left school and did his life, and then he joined the Army a little bit before I joined up.
Fast forward a few years, I'm there, I'm a father with a little girl. I'm married at this stage, got a wife, but I couldn't hold down a job. One day I was catching a bus and I saw on the side of the bus an advertisement for the Army, which said the Army, the Edge. And I honestly, Carl, I looked at this and I thought, the Army? How hard could that be? That can't be that hard, surely. I joined the Army because I love my country. But I also joined the army because I needed a job.
Yeah. Across one year's calendar, there are all these significant days for Australians. Which are the most significant?
Number one on the calendar for Australians is Anzac Day. It's a sacred day in the practices of Australians and in our calendar as well. And number two is Remembrance Day, the 11th of the 11th. And even though it's not a holiday, it's not a day off like Anzac Day is, nonetheless it's pretty important, which does show the sacredness, the respect, the ritual with which Australians remember great sacrifice.
Yeah.
Number three is Christmas, and while that's pretty commercial these days, it still is amongst the highest seasons for church attendance. And number four is Easter.
Yeah.
So the Christian traditions still hold quite a connection with Australians and our yearly rituals.
Anzac Day, the March Past, the Minute Silence, was all created by an Anglican chaplain, Canon David Garland, and he based it on the Requiem Mass. And his hope was that commemoration would point people to God rather than a kind of nationalistic sentimentalism or idolatry. I came across the story of Chaplain Hugh Cunningham, who was an Australian chaplain in the brutality and the horror of the Thai-Burma railway and the prisoner of war camps under the Japanese. And he made a difference in that camp. Many soldiers spoke of the tone and the difference that it made with chaplains of his moral fibre and courage, their selfless care for the soldiers around him. The Japanese wondered what he was about because they couldn't see a rank. They didn't wear a rank at this point, the chaplains, and he was treated with immense authority and respect by the other soldiers. So eventually, they weren't sure what he was, but they gave him a little armband with Japanese characters, and suddenly the Japanese soldiers started to treat him with more respect rather than the casual brutality that they treated him with before. Well, he didn't know what that said for the several years that he was in captivity. He came back to Australia, he kept it, and finally got someone to translate it. And it said, "Captain of the souls of men." And for me, that summed up the vocation of spiritual and moral leadership that Australian chaplains exhibited.
Historically, chaplains have been in Defence Forces for thousands of years because the pressure cooker environment that exists in these battalions is incredible, and you can't not think about the big things in life. Picture this, you're 18, 19 years of age, and then you say, the legal officer brings you in and says, "Listen, we're going to do your will now. Time to write your will. Where do you want all your stuff to go when you die?"
We got shot at. I remember early on, we were on a patrol, and there was a shot that fired, and it would have landed 10 metres above our heads. And I remember at that moment, Callum, 20, whatever it is, and 6'4", full of muscle, all that sort of, I was pumped up, and realised at that moment, I want my mother. I want to go home. I don't want to be here anymore. This is.
Yeah.
Oh my! I could die here. If that was 2 metres short, I could.
Wow.
You're jumping out of planes, it's terrifying. You're writing your will, and you're a trained killer, and then the operational tempo is very high back then when we were there, with, Afghanistan, Iraq, East Timor, Solomons. A lot of people are being killed, you're avoiding being killed, some of our guys are being killed. Every day I'm having really deep, serious conversations about the eternal things.
This is the Bible of Lieutenant Elvis Jenkins.
Wow. Yep.
And he swapped his Bible for a French Bible.
Oh gosh, look at that.
And at Gallipoli, his little French New Testament took the bullet.
And the bullet's still there, John?
Still there, that's it, that's the bullet.
Wow.
It came right through, he had it back the front in his pocket, and it went right through Revelation and Acts and everything, and it stopped at John's Gospel. And he always said, "I was saved by the Gospels."
What exactly did they do when they were in those settings, say in Gallipoli on the beach?
Yeah, chaplains have these multi-pronged roles. So the first is religious and spiritual, so prayer meetings, church services, worship services, rites of passage, praying for the dying, caring for the wounded. There's a practical pastoral element. They're caring about the social welfare of soldiers, so they're writing letters back to the family. They're offering help wherever it's needed, whether that's carrying supplies or acting as stretcher bearers under fire. They had a role in terms of moral leadership, instructing soldiers in morality and ethics. And finally, they had an important role in commemoration. So that was in burying the dead, but also in leading services of thanksgiving, of worship, and really shaping commemoration.
So does that make a difference, like that it's actually important for the chaplain to be on the front line?
I think it makes a difference regarding credibility. The fact that the chaplain is present but unarmed, constantly in every theatre of war Australia's ever been involved in, is a great thing to build up, hey, these guys are for us.
Mackenzie became quite a hero and a person of some note.
Well, Mackenzie was the chaplain in Gallipoli whose reputation took on mythic proportions. He was a bear of a man, massive frame, but that meant he had this extraordinary strength. So he would carry supplies, he would cut steps into the dirt to help soldiers get through. He acted as a stretcher bearer under fire. He was burying them under fire, and he was right up on the front lines on the trenches. He also made an impression on them physically, so a kind of muscular Christianity that soldiers could relate to. But it was really his demeanour as a kind of father figure. They called him the father of the battalion. He was the dad of the battalion. And after the war, word got around, and all sorts of stories and legends were created about fighting Mackenzie.
Tim Booker was the most popular chaplain in the Australian Army, not because he softened his message, but because of his convictions. But it also helped that he happened to be fitter than most of the boys, stronger. He did parachuting with them, he ran with them, he did these things, but not to impress them, but because he loved to do them. He considered himself a soldier. And so Tim Booker made an impact on me as a non-Christian in the sense that I saw him there and I thought there was a part of me that thought, if I'm ever going to be a Christian, I want to be like that. That's the guy I want to be like.
What's the unique experience of the partners of people in the military then?
I think we're placed into positions that other people in society don't have to think about. Like, for example, when you are sending your husband off to the Middle East or to a theatre of war somewhere, actually they might not come back. And I don't think there's a lot of jobs where you actually stop and think, my husband might not come home, or my child, if you're a parent of a defence kid, might not come home. So that's unique. I think also the uniqueness of not knowing timelines and when things are going to happen. Normally you know how long a meeting's going to go for or a triple way is going to go for, but a lot of times we've got no idea.
A few years ago, you shifted into a ministry to help the partners of people in the military. How did you start that?
Yes, after 23 years of being a defence spouse, I really have a heart and a passion and a love for these women who are doing life really tough, and I really feel God's called me to do life alongside them, but with the whole aim of pointing them to Christ, and that's the solid rock that's not going to move, it's not going to change.
The things that you learn that make you succeed in the army, does it sometimes make you fail in life, or is it the opposite?
Carl, that is absolutely wrong. The way you're taught to relate to people within hierarchy, the way that you have expectations on other people, that they will do things and so on and so forth, it has a huge effect. Not just professionally, although yes, army guys struggle to keep and hold jobs afterwards because they've been so taught structure and hierarchy that they struggle outside of it. They can become very domineering. But it also has an effect on the home life.
That's a real clash of worlds, because you are taught to think and do things in a certain way in the military, but that's not how the civilian world does it. So it's a real change of culture, a real change of thinking, and we have to support people better.
So for those of us who haven't been in military service, how do we help people?
Yeah, I think as we move around the country, the first thing we've got to do is find friends. if you can be that one friend to the defence family that's moving in, if you can be that person who's looking out for the mum who's home on her own with her kids repeatedly for, months, weeks, days, and even just a hello and how you going, and have a coffee or those.
That doesn't sound too
practical-
complicated, does it?
It's not hard. It's actually just having the eyes that are looking out for those people.
You had a second child, but that sort of lifestyle is not particularly good for a marriage. What happened?
The marriage was going badly. It was falling apart. And we decided to do something which I wouldn't recommend to anyone, which is to say, hey, let's have another baby. This might fix things. A week after my son was born, my battalion was deployed to East Timor for, I think it was 8 months, with 2 days' notice.
But Timor was the big thing when we moved up to our battalion went to Townsville, and Dave was there. So then I caught up with Dave and saw just how bad the situation was.
What was he like?
He was out of control. So the marriage was imploding, was officially about to end, and it had knocked him around, and he was living a very bad life.
And so when I got on the plane to East Timor, it was realising that's the end of my marriage. And actually there was a part of me that was excited. The thought of I can go home now in 6 months' time and I can do what I want, whenever I want, however I want, with whoever I want. And that was the nature of my life for the next 6 years. But by the time I'm 28, I've achieved all the things I ever wanted, and there's still a part of me that's deeply unhappy, a part of me that's deeply unsatisfied.
It was 2007, and Carl went away on a 10-day trip somewhere. I don't even remember where. And I discovered that I was really discontent. I had neglected myself for all those years of being a wife and mother. And now, Carl had a blossoming ministry. The kids were, had great friends, busy lives, and there's me wondering, what I had to show for the last, 15, 20 years. I was falling short in a big way. I'm not where I need to be. It was an awful feeling of being so laid bare for everything that I hadn't been doing all those years. I suddenly started asking my question, what if? What if I took this seriously? What if I did read my Bible daily and pray? And what if I did say yes to all these positive what ifs, but it required so much of me?
It was one of those moments where God broke into her life in a remarkable way and met her in a time where she suddenly thought, I really don't like what I'm doing.
I felt my life was ordinary and I wanted a life less ordinary. So when Carl came back, I, said, we just need to go and have coffee straight away. I've got something to tell you. And told him that he was coming back to a completely different person to who he left.
When we first met, she had a passionate heart for ministry that wasn't able to be fulfilled.
It was a bringing forward of God's call again on my life from when I was in my early 20s, when I couldn't work out how and where God could use me. What if I have been given this life-changing truth inside my soul? What if that's God's word over my life? It's profound. And just the thought of that I would be anointed to take God's life-giving news to others. And yet now for these past 10, 12 years, that's what we've been doing.
So how did you then explore another option?
My twin sister had always kept talking to me about Christian things, and she'd preloaded a bunch of sermons into YouTube, and I clicked on one of these sermons. And there I heard someone speak about Jesus' death and say that Jesus died for bad people, not for good people.
When he called you, were you surprised?
So I was surprised because it's beautiful when it happens, but it's always a shock when you see this turnaround and the spiritual lights are on and he's keen to come back to God. So God's clearly now working in him, bringing him back, yeah.
I confessed to him everything. Not that I had to, I just wanted to. I said, here's been the reality of my last years. And he laughed and he said, Dave, I know. We all know. Everyone knows who you are. I said, Tim, what do I do? And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to know God.
Well, he'd finally realised that he was not living for God. I think when you're born and bred in a good, strong Christian home, you know it all, and you think, Christian know it all, you're Christian sort of thing. I think that's where his thinking was for many years.
And what Tim said to me over the next minute has changed my eternity, Carl. He said, Jesus died for you not because you're perfect, but because you're not perfect. But you cannot know God until you understand that Jesus has died for you, he's risen from the dead, and you need to ask for forgiveness and understand that Jesus is your only hope, not you.
It has to be that personal decision, not only to repent of your sins and believe Jesus, but put Jesus in charge of your life.
And I said, Tim, I've prayed 100 times before, mate, 1,000,000 times. And I had, when my wife had left, whenever I was scared, when someone shot at me, I prayed. I put the phone down and I leant on the side of my bed, and I hadn't cried for a decade. And I cried out to God to forgive me. And as I stood up that next morning, covered in my own tears and still my clothes, I went to the mirror and I said, I'm a Christian.
Clearly, life is going to change. What changed most?
The first 2 weeks of my Christian life, I was the most Christian man in Darwin. I was, just telling everyone, oh, I'm a Christian. But 2 weeks, one day later, I was back in the pubs. I got drunk, I kept fighting, And what began for me next, Carl, was a journey, particularly over the next 2 years, of disentangling myself from my sinful, my behaviour which just rejected God again and again.
Now, when you're a proud, big Australian Army officer, that's the big thing, is humbling yourself to put Jesus in charge. So I could see that was the battle. He knew Jesus had saved him, but the life change was that was an arm wrestle for some time after that conversation. But clearly, God was working, and I know that God, when he starts his work, he doesn't stop it, and he wins. So I knew it was just a matter of time before he fully gave himself to Jesus.
You said you joined the family business. So what was the response to the family as you got a job within a church?
Mate, I remember telling my parents when I became a Christian, and my dad wept with joy. My mother looked at me and said, are you sure? Is this real? Is this... And my parents have been my biggest supporters. God has blessed me with a beautiful wife now, Sam, and we've got 4 more little boys in addition to my 2 wonderful children.
Well, as you see Dave now and what he's doing, what do you think?
Oh, it's just a beautiful, miraculous transformation. yeah, God's done an incredible work.